Hello everyone, Dartsnovi here. RMG Productions, giving you a shout. You have my back. Honestly. I gladly accept to be moderator. But I may have to do a continuation of my last video in this subject. I'm going to have to explain something because it seems like these dumbasses don't understand anything about the expanded universe. How George Lucas never considered it canon. Well, and anytime you bring up, oh, you have no proof that it was canon, I have various sources. I just brought out a few. Splinter of Mind's Eye, which the introduction of that, but basically is pretty self-explanatory that it was canon. I'll read this again. It wasn't long after I began writing Star Wars that I realized the story was more than a signal film could hold. As the saga of Skywalkers and Jedi Knights unfolded, I began to see it as a tale that could take at least 9 films to tell. 3 trilogies. I realized in making my way through the backstory and after story that I was really setting up to write the middle story. After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabit its galaxy. But those are not stories I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers inspired by the glimpses of the galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today, is it amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that is so amazing, gifted writers who contribute new stories to the saga. This legacy began with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, published less than a year after the release of Star Wars, written by Alan Dean Foster, a well-known author and talented science fiction author. Splinter was promoted as a further adventure of Luke Skywalker. It hit the bookshelves just as I was preparing to write my own further adventure of Luke in the form of a script entitled The Empire Strikes Back. It seems only fitting after all these years that Splinter would be republished as I prepare once again to write another further adventure set long ago in a galaxy far, far away. You see, tell me about that quote. It didn't seem like George hated the expanded universe. I had no respect for it. If he didn't, he would have never allowed it to happen. This is more evidence that it was canon. There's an interview after this book, which I'll get to a quote in a second, which basically shows that George Lucas was very much involved. They didn't do what the hell they wanted. So let me just get to that point. I'll read the exact quote. See, give me a second, guys. But you just to deny these facts is to basically deny reality. You cannot say that it was never canon. It was very much canon and very much relevant. Oh, I'll read a quote from the Reader's Companion after this. Let's see, I'm just looking for the quote exactly. It's a lot of pages. Let's see. And besides, for you dumbass to say the EU was a mess and had no continuity, what do you think George Lucas hired Leland Chee to do? To manage it. Leland Chee is the reason why the expanded universe, was kept together well throughout the years. It didn't have nearly as many contradictions as the new canon did, because now they just don't give a fuck. But then again, people like you don't know anything about Star Wars other than the movies. Especially you, Andre. All right. Oh, by the way, A sense of continuity. Did you know Nom Honor, one of the main villains in the New Jedi Order series? Guess where he made his first appearance? Chrism Empire 2 by Dark Horse Comics. So yeah, what occurrence of continuity. So yeah, why would they take a character that appeared in a comic and make him one of the main antagonists in the series, in the novels? That sounds like it's too good to be true. Let's see. I'm looking for the quote actually right here. Okay, here's a quote. This is the exact quote right here. This showcased that George Lucas was involved in the expanded universe. That you know nothing's have no idea what you're talking about. And it's in this book, by the way. How much of a role did George Lucas play in shaping the series? George Lucas had been involved in all the spin-off Star Wars publishing, but only on big concepts or plot points. The initial 5-year New Jedi Order plot outline and early thoughts on who might die were sent to him in the form of a Q&A memo and some eventually discussed by phone. I would characterize his role as limited but important. He's the one who said the alien invaders could not be the dark side Force users. See? They intended originally to have the Yuuzhan Vong be dark side Force users, but George Lucas vetoed that idea. Yeah, he told he wasn't involved. He totally didn't care. That we couldn't kill Luke. That we had to kill Anakin instead of Jason. Oh yeah, by the way, Vector Prime was originally supposed to kill Luke Skywalker. Bet you didn't know that. George Lucas had a set rule: you can't kill Luke, 3PO, or R2-D2. Every other character was fair game. As for Anakin instead of Jason, we had originally planned the other way around. Other than that, he came to ask some basic questions for us that are pretty rare. Mostly leaves us the books and his licensing people trust him to get it right. Several times at Skywalker Ranch, George was sitting almost within arm's reach, but I never got to speak with him. But he played a major role in giving shape to the New Jedi Order by completing exclusively on the early version of the 5-year story arc, as Lucy Sally had said. His objective to Anakin Solo being the main series protagonist was, I think, possible confusion with Anakin Skywalker in the prequel trilogy of movies. There would be too many Anakins out there. I basically recalled taking particular exception to our careful description of Ami as a dwarfish. So yes, Anakin Solo was killed off, if you actually know anything about Anakin Solo, because of the prequel trilogy. George Lucas didn't want people getting confused of having two characters named Anakin. Anakin Solo, had he not had the name Anakin, probably would not have died. Jason would have, but they named him Anakin because the prequels weren't expected to be made at the time. So yes, to avoid confusion, unfortunately, one of my favorite characters had to bite the dust. So yeah, more evidence that it supports that it was indeed canon. When we received his feedback, suddenly we were fed with having to create a new enemy and yet somehow differentiate that enemy from the dozen already developed in various authors of the Bantam books. Worse, we're stripped of the one character from Bantam time who were only set up and inhabit the Luke mantle from Luke. Even so, Sally and I emerged with a lot of work with other instruments in it. Like the original film trilogy, the New Jedi Order as a whole and in individual books follows Joseph Campbell's concept of the myth of the hero's journey. Is that Lucas' influence at work? Not in the sense of him directing us to use it. I don't even think that he knows we did it, but we wanted to use the hero's journey as a template because it's so basic to Star Wars, to what George Lucas has done with his mythos. Oh, yep, the concept of the hero's journey. That was used in New Jedi Order. Bet you didn't know that, did you? In order to tell the best stories, we pulled ideas from very various sources to come up with themes that can be woven through various works of new Star Wars fiction. In our big creative means, we work with publishers, editors, and art writers to develop strong stories of multiple levels, including the pacing of basic plot points, beginning, climax, resolution, themes with mythological and biblical themes have been presented from others, and individual character development arcs with specific level development and attributes, depending on whatever Jedi, Sith, alien, good, bad, or other. It's a combination of all those elements that made the stories fit into its signature people associate with Star Wars. It's not just George Lucas' decision that requires us to do this. Rather, we learn it by observing his techniques and then apply it with the same development process in our dealings with our points and editors. One of the advantages of using Campbell's templates is that it's familiar to us all. On the minute and the grand scale in this level, we each challenge in the ways that bring out either hero or the villain. We have choices and we are accounted for those choices and their consequence. We're sometimes drawn to situations we thought we could never handle and how it comes off not to the point of the journey itself. We discussed the hero's journey at length in the first creative meetings. After feedback from George, we decide on Jason as our hero and the character who would undergo the most dynamic changes. In many ways, the Jedi Order is really his series. At those meetings, we chanted the character threads for each of the main characters and how those threads would interact with Jason is shown as an indecisive young man who grows into a strong, confident Jedi. We talked about Vigier and the role she could play. We also chanted other characters' journeys, how Han would react to Chewie's death, his blaming Anakin, how something like that affects a family. We discussed how Anakin was the stronger of the siblings, with how his death would affect things, since he was the obvious choice as Luke's successor. A template such as Kimball's can be a very interesting in reference for an author, as a reminder to keep a story exciting and keep it growing and developing it. But I don't advise writers to use it as rigid framework for a story. In other words, following it slavishly would probably result in a stiff, unlifelike story. Stories need to grow, at least to some degree, organically, with elements developing out what came before it. It meeting the mentor really wants to happen before the call to adventure, for example. It should happen the way instead of having the story forced into a mold. It doesn't want it to. Unfortunately, the hero's journey model allows for a lot of flexibility and terrific as a reminder that stories move up and down, forward and backward, have climaxes and crises all around the way. Although, frankly, this aspect of the series didn't end up as well as developed as I would have liked, probably due to the completion of using multiple authors individual books, had it like Matt Strivers. But I would have liked to see the mythic dimension, the hero's journey, involved a little bit more. I don't see how conclusively in this series as a whole on the grand scale. All right. I'm gonna end it here with this book, but essentially it proves that it was canon. They do mention how they were originally not going to incorporate the Bantam era novels as part of this. This was supposed to be a soft reboot. However, due to the fans' outrage, not them talking about the original books, they don't want them to abandon that continuity. They left it alone. Now, Dark Empire. This is the first edition, by the way. This has an interview with Kevin J. Anderson. I'm not going to read the whole quote because that'd be too long. But I'm just going to read one part of it that is of significance. Essentially, let's see, where is it? Sorry, looking. All right. By the way, Kevin J. Anderson, you can thank him for the reason why the Star Wars Expanded Universe is where it is today. It's even the new canon to a lesser extent. Even though I don't think it's what it should be, but I'm going to continue. Since my novels take place only a year after Timothy Zahn's storyline, I got in touch with him to show how he was going to wrap up his trilogy, what sort of material I was going to be left with, which of his characters were still going to be around, but the situation would change. After getting those details, I went to work plotting one long story broken into 3 volumes. I produced a 30-page proposal and an outline that described the Jedi Academy story in great detail, which I mailed off to Bantam and Lucasfilm. Only afterward did I learn that Tim Vitch and Kim Kennedy's Dark Empire coming out of Dark Horse, Natural Dark Empire takes place exactly between Zond and my trilogies. I believe my response was something incoherent, for at least unprintable. All of a sudden, I had to factor an entire major story into what I already plotted. As you read it, you'll see Dark Empire doesn't add minor things either. Just by looking at the covers but issues, you can see that Tom Bitch brings not only Boba Fett, the bounty hunter, but also the Emperor himself, and Luke Skywalker goes over to the dark side to be the Emperor's right hand, just like Darth Vader. I couldn't just ignore stuff like that and pretend that it never happened, nor can I fix it with a little band-aid to my storyline. My head started to ache what I was going to do. I had no choice but to call this Tim Vitch guy, who was causing me so many problems, see how we could resolve this. Imagine my surprise when Tim turned out to be a friendly, fascinating person with a good sense of humor, plenty of fresh idea. That the telephone conversation, the first of many, lasted over an hour and a half, and we each swapped numerous ideas and suggested for each other's storylines. He agreed to work backward to set things up for me, and I changed my focus someplace to take off from events in Dark Empire. Tom and I took it as a personal challenge to make our stories mesh as true chapters in the overall Star Wars saga. True chapters. Yeah, why would he say that if it was never canon? By the way, this comic, along with the Thrawn trilogy and the Jedi Academy trilogy, was the first occurrence of continuity between various different EU works. So yes, if it was never canon, why the fuck would they... And they didn't care about continuity, and there was none. Why would authors communicate with each other? Kevin J. Anderson and Tim Vitch. Yeah, I believe there was continuity. Now, my personal favorite way to owning I know nothing like Pedophile Express, The Reader's Companion, written by Pablo Gato. The same guy who basically... who's responsible for the death of the expanded universe, but I'm not going to get to that. You know what? It's lovely to use this against him, by the way, because this validates everything. This basically proves that everything I say here. If you are to debate me about Star Wars knowledge, make sure to buy The Reader's Companion first, because it could... and all those other books, of course, there's various other sources. I just took those out because they're the ones that I believe are the most relevant. See, before Star Wars graced the silver string of packed movie houses, its story was received to an eager public via the printed world as a tie-in novel based on the screenplay of Star Wars arrived in bookstores over 5 months prior to the film's debut on May 25th, 1977, helping spread awareness of the movie to come. The pre-digital world of word-mouth age. As such, the very first Star Wars fans were readers. Yeah! Guess you didn't know that, did you? The first people who were fans were people who read the novelization of A New Hope, which at that time was called Star Wars: The Adventures of Luke Skywalker. Bet you didn't know that. And you know what? It was released December 1976, so Star Wars' 40th anniversary is a month from now. Yes, in a month, Star Wars will be 40 years old, all thanks to the novelization. Of course, I'm not going to read the entire thing again, but it pretty much proves that the very first Star Wars fans were people that were readers. People who've read Star Wars have always been, I hate to use this, but bigger fans of those who watch the movies. It's always been this way. I don't have a problem with you being a casual. I have a problem with people claiming they're more hardcore than someone like me. They're a bigger fan than I am, despite never putting the effort or the work to actually read any of this material, or at least learn about it. Okay, not to mention, this book proves the common misconception of the expanded universe being completely false. Ironically, even someone who hated the expanded universe wrote this little book that proves everything. There are some minor mistakes in here, but whatever. Now I'm going to read this. The Death Star exploded. Vader's armor burned on the pyre, and Ewok dance night away in 1983. The Star Wars trilogy ended with a satisfying finale, and the attention of many Star Wars fans wandered elsewhere. Lucasfilm's focus shifted briefly from galaxy-spinning epics to smaller, kid-target flair starring Ewoks and droids. By 1986, the Star Wars was silent. There had not been a new novel to read since 1983, and the Marvel Comics storyline dried up. The expanded universe wasn't a complete desert in 1987. West End Games began producing source books and role-playing products rather than telling stories. Those works concerned on giving players the tools to tell stories. It was successful enough for its audience, but did not inject Star Wars back into the public consciousness. Yeah, anyone cannot deny that Star Wars was pretty much faded from public consciousness after Return of the Jedi, and the franchise would not be around today. All there would be is 3 movies and a few novels and the Marvel Comics. However, this is something juicy. This will make someone like Andre cry like a little bitch. You can't debate me on this. I'm one of the members of the Jedi Council, bitch. Bantam Books' publication of Heir of the Empire in 1991 changed everything. Lucasfilm Licensing Division embarked on a plan to create a publishing program partnering with Bantam Books and Dark Horse Comics to resurrect Star Wars storytelling. By this time, licensing Star Wars products were rarity. Rarity in the sense that there was not that much Star Wars stuff released at this point. And the level of potential interest in Star Wars stories was unknown. Even George Lucas had his doubts. Yes. The prequels weren't planned, by the way, at this point. They weren't going to be... He had no intention of making the prequels. But he allowed the program to go forward with a few caveats to ensure that the characters remain true and intact, and to have tale build upon affect the others, so that the universe depicted in the books could expand with every story. Yeah, it seemed George Lucas cared about about Star Wars enough, the EU, to make sure the characters were intact, that each story built on top of the other. Empire by Timothy Zahn debuted at number 11. This is going to be very juicy, by the way, for all you EU haters. Heir to Empire by Timothy Zahn debuted at number 11, New York Sellers list, and in its 6th week moved to number 1 spot, pushing John Gimmel's The Flame off the top of the chart. It stayed on the list for 19 weeks. This clearly proved there was an audience hungry for more Star Wars storytelling. Also, in 1991, Star Wars returned to comics, and within a few short years, more licensing added to the growing number excitement as Star Wars returned to the forefront of the pop culture landscape. From 1991 to 1991, the prequel era still roped off from expiration due to the impending theatrical release of Episode 1. Publishers such as Bantam, Dark Horse added to the positive end of the Star Wars trilogy timeline, filling over the years beyond Return of the Jedi. Luke and Leia had renewed life, and they were joined by a rich cast of new heroes and villains who would set forth the foundation for future storytelling. So yes, Papa Hilgado, as much of a person who hated the expanded universe, he acknowledged these facts. Even he does. Without Heir to Empire, there would be no prequel movies, no endless amount of movies that Disney's likely going to shit out until Star Wars gets burned out from the general public. It's all thanks to Timothy Zahn's Star Wars novel. Heir to Empire was number 1 New York Times bestseller for 19 weeks. weeks. 19 weeks, for God's sake. None of the new stuff has ever done that. Oh, there's more. There's been over 70 Star Wars novels that have been New York Times bestseller. Over 70. So, the expanded universe was never relevant. The expanded universe is nothing but fan fiction. Well, apparently, it wasn't to all the fans that bought those books. If it never meant anything, something like this would have never gotten published. Hell, Star Wars would have never. There wouldn't be a new Star Wars movie after Return of the Jedi. The expanded universe is an important part of Star Wars. Very important. Without it, there would be no new movies. There would be the franchise wouldn't have the dedicated fan base that it has. I don't care what you fans of the original trilogy say, you stupid elitists, you know nothings, claiming you know more about Star Wars, despite never venturing outside your comfort zone, never reading any of this content. I don't want to hear from you that you know more about Star Wars than I do. You don't. You know nothing. It's thanks to the hard work of all these authors and all the fans that bought into this stuff is why Episode 7 was made. It's why the prequels were made. It all started with Star Wars Heir to Empire. Without that novel, there would have never been a Star Wars movie after Return of the Jedi. I welcome you to debate me anytime, motherfuckers. I have my proof that it was canon. And if that isn't good enough, I'll give you a link to various other quotes to back up what I say. And if that still isn't good enough, then I'm not wasting any more of my time. The expanded universe is just as much Star Wars as the movies. The expanded universe is just as important as the movies. Star Wars is not just a movie series. Never has been, never will be. It's been a multimedia franchise since 1978. And it's going to continue to be that way. Until the franchise is dead, it's going to continue. It is not exclusively a movie series. You're free to watch only the movies, but you're free not to like the expanded universe, but you do not deny the undeniable facts. It is an important part of the franchise's history. Without it, the franchise, as we all know it, would not be around. All we would have is the original trilogy, the Marvel Comics, and Splinter of Mind's Eye, and the Han Solo and Lando Calrissian trilogies. That's it. That is all we would have for Star Wars. It had not been for the expanded universe. You can own a bunch of action figures. You can own every version of the original trilogy. But that doesn't mean you know more about Star Wars than I do. And you stupid fucks, I'm looking at you, red letter media fanboys, know nothing about Star Wars. All you know is what is been shown to you. All you know is what you see on screen. You don't look at the stuff that's beyond that. I'm not talking about the EU. You're stupid. The Star Wars saga is the greatest saga of all time. Even if the prequel trilogy, it has its flaws. It's not as good as the originals. It did nothing to ruin the original trilogy. The prequels, I'll get to that another day. You don't understand Star Wars. All you understand is what you see on screen. You don't understand the inner stuff in there, the themes with the movies, what it deals with, the hero's journey. All that started with the novelization of A New Hope. Everything, the entire Star Wars saga, it started there. And the franchise has never been exclusively a movie series. Shut the fuck up. Next time you talk about Star Wars, make sure to back up what you say with facts. Owning every version of the original trilogy and prequels does not make you a hardcore fan. You're a hardcore fan of the movies, but you're not a hardcore Star Wars fan. A hardcore Star Wars fan expands their Star Wars knowledge outside the movies. The movies is just a small part of the universe. And you guys don't even understand the movies. George Lucas's era of Star Wars will live on, while the current era will be forgotten years from now. The original expanded universe stayed alive for 37 years for a reason. The new canon won't even last even half that. I guarantee it. The movies, the original trilogy, and the prequels will be remembered. The new trilogy that's being released will be forgotten. And all those other movies that Disney will shit out. No. The only part of Star Wars that's going to be remembered is the George Lucas era. Long live the Star Wars expanded universe. Long live the George Lucas era. George Lucas's Star Wars is Star Wars. And all this stuff I showed you proved that George was involved in the EU. And proved that authors work together to ensure the expanded universe is the great, vast universe that it became. I doubt any of the new canon will ever reach to that level. I challenge you, anyone, on this. This is Darcenovia, over and out.